Welcome to the Chiro Money Show, where we're helping chiropractors make better financial decisions so they can build stability in their finances and a lifestyle that they love. We're your hosts, Chris Shield and Scott Campbell of Align Wealth. Excited to dive in. What are we talking about today, Scott?
Let's go. We've been talking a lot about systems in some earlier episodes. We're going to get back into that today. We love our systems, don't we, Chris?
We love our system. There's a system for everything.
We're such nerds. I think it's coming with love. But we've been talking a lot about systems in previous episodes. I think today conversation, we're going to shift gears to the personal side and talk about what we refer to as behavioral cash flow planning. We're going to have a little bit more of a technical kind of hands-on approach to how we build out cash flow plans for our clients. So this might be a little bit more of a visual podcast. So you can watch this on Spotify. You can watch it on YouTube. So
they can watch this on Spotify?
You can watch it on Spotify, Chris.
Holy smokes.
I
Technology.
know. The world that we live in, you can do that today.
Wild.
Yeah.
And after your buddy Dave Chilton, the wealthy barber, he was the first one I saw doing that on Spotify.
And we were the second. I'm just joking.
Not actually. Who knows?
Not actually.
Okay, so Is this a budget, Scott? Are we talking about budgets right now?
Chris, you brought up the B word so fast in the conversation.
I know, I had to.
We don't love the word budget around here. So first I'll say this. We often kind of rag on the word budgets and say that all the time to clients, like, we hate the word budgets. We're not going to be building you a budget. Don't worry. This is not a budget. Budgets have their place and purpose. But the way I think about budgets, two things I'll say on budgets. One, I think they can be really useful for certain things like planning for a wedding or planning for a children's birthday party. Like you have a fixed thing that has a certain actual budget. Like we only want to spend X amount of dollars on a wedding or X amount of dollars on our kid's birthday party. It's reasonable to have some sort of budget in mind when you kind of map out how much you're going to spend and where, right? I'll say this too about budgets as well. There's going to be a small subset of the population who are really good at nailing a budget on a month-to-month basis. My best estimate is that's maybe 5% or less of most people. Would you agree?
100%. And that's kind of why we downplay the budget part, because most people have had a negative experience with budgeting.
Yeah.
Right?
They go into it with the right intentions. They get all excited. They make the spreadsheet. They fill in how much they're going to spend in what category. It goes well for the first couple of weeks, maybe even the first couple of months. But then life happens and then it blows up in their face. They get frustrated and they go back to their old ways.
100%. And if I'm being frank, most budgets, they suck. They're time consuming, they're filled with guilt, and they're unsustainable. And we are much bigger fans of systems like the behavioral cash flow system because we fail to the level of our systems. And if your system is a traditional budget that's time consuming and makes you feel shitty every time you go to it, it's not going to work.
For sure. When we think about cash flow plans, I think some pushback that we get is like, I make good money. I'm earning good income. Like, do I actually need a cash flow plan?
Yeah, I think it has very little to do with earning. It's what you do with it that matters. And whether you're earning a very high income or more modest income, it's irrelevant. It's what are you doing with it? And are you putting it in the right places? So I think any level of income needs a cash flow plan. If you say, we've run into the odd situation where a client has very good awareness of where their money's going. And
they're not accumulating debt or anything like that. Like they're pretty good.
No debt. They have no debt. They know where their money's going. They have excess left over at the end of the month. They're allocating that towards goals in some cases. If that's you, great. You probably don't need a cash flow plan, but you would still benefit from it. It would probably still alleviate some stress and anxiety because we all have that around money and spending. Tell us a bit more about the behavior and psychology side of some of the detriments of traditional budgeting.
I think in today's world, it's so easy to spend money.
Never been easier.
Everyone out there wants you to spend your money. Everyone, right? And they make it frictionless as possible between just one-click buys on Amazon and tapping with our watch or our phone, or pretty soon we'll just be able to blink and boom, we bought the thing, right? It's so easy to buy these days. So in order to be able to keep track of dollar amounts tied to certain spending categories, it's very hard to keep track of in your day-to-day out and about how much you're spending on certain things, right? That's where our budgets fail. It doesn't work with our natural human behaviors about how we go about our day and how we make spending decisions. Yeah. So we need to find a system that works with our human behaviors to the best of our ability. It's never going to be
Right.
perfect, but we can certainly make a system that kind of has some guardrails that kind of works in our favor versus against it.
Yeah, we don't embrace delayed gratification very much, right? Like working really hard to save up for something and really like put a lot of effort into that. We much prefer ease and comfort and just being able to like buy things now. And
Of course.
debt has also never been more accessible than it is today.
Yeah.
Never been more common to have credit card and lines of credit debt. And all of those mechanisms make it so easy for us to just go and get whatever it is we crave or desire
Yeah.
without having to delay it.
Yeah, for sure.
hmm
All right. Where should we go? Should we dive right into our case study? Any more questions that you wanted to fire at me?
Yeah, well, before we dive into sharing the case study and
Okay.
stuff, why don't you outline just some of the differences with that behavioral cash flow system, how it's like actually designed to work with us as humans, as emotional beings. So obviously we've pointed out some flaws with traditional budgeting. How does the behavioral cash flow system address some of these flaws or downsides of the traditional budget and match better with us as humans, emotional human beings?
Yeah, I think we'll just hook right onto that word emotions. When it comes to our spending, we are emotional beings and we make emotional decisions every single day with our purchases. But there's also a lot of things that we spend money on that don't have any sort of emotion or joy attached to it. So when we think about building out a behavioral cash flow plan, the way we look at it is kind of bucketing your spending into two primary categories. One category is referred to as committed expenses. And when we talk about committed expenses, it's not necessarily fixed expenses because they could be a bit variable. But the way we think about committed expenses are basically expenses that have no emotion or joy attached to it. Like, Chris, do you ever go to the pump and like once you fill up the tank, do you like bust out 2 or 3 more jerry cans and like fill up more just because you're like, yeah, gasoline?
No, I don't love
Does it
gas.
fire you up?
No,
Okay, but it's
I
a
appreciate
variable cost.
it is very, it
It's a
fluctuates
variable
depending on how
cost.
much you drive and the price of gas changes. So how do I plan for how much gas I'm going to spend in a month?
For sure. Same thing with your heating bill and
Yeah.
your mortgage might be variable and fluctuate. You're never excited to pay the mortgage. But on the flip side of our spending, that's where we talk about what we refer to as your spendable. It can maybe be called it could be called discretionary versus non-discretionary spending. But then you bring up the topic of like groceries. Are groceries discretionary or are they not discretionary? We need groceries to put food on the table for our family.
We don't need necessarily the high-end groceries. We could do
Unless that's
like,
important to you,
exactly.
right? And there's variability. And when you go to the grocery store, if you're like me or anyone really, going to the grocery store, there's emotion in the purchase that you're buying. You're making
100%.
little emotional decisions every time you pick something off the shelf and you're trying to make a decision whether or not you should buy it.
And the whole store is designed in a way to draw on your emotion and make you spend money.
For sure. For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into this in terms of committed cash flow being your kind of non-emotional spending and your spendable being kind of your emotional or joyful spending. So we're going to be carrying on the conversation into kind of a case study that we broke out. We're going to do a bit of a screen share. We're going to kind of show you kind of the meat of how we build out a cash flow plan. But first, we're going to share kind of a quick visual here of what we typically see in terms of how people kind of manage their cash flow versus what a behavioral cash flow system looks like. Hey, before we keep going, if you've been listening and thinking, I could really use some clarity around where I truly stand with my finances, we've got you covered. Take our free financial clarity assessment. It only takes about 5 minutes and you'll get a personalized scorecard showing exactly where you're strong, where you might be spinning your wheels a little bit, and where to focus next. You can head over to alignwealth.ca or just hit the link in the show notes. All right, cool. Back to the show. All right, Chris, what are we looking at here?
So we're looking at what we see as pretty typical for the average person, how they manage their current kind of day-to-day finances. Their income flows in, maybe both partners' income flow into the same joint checking account. And from there, a whole bunch of things happen. We have things like your bills and utilities that are like automated payments. We have some of those things that are fixed in nature coming out of there. We have some saving maybe coming out of there. We have some debt payments coming out of there. And so it's just everything's coming into one account, and then out of that account, maybe the primary spending is actually happening on a credit card or some other location, but the funds are coming out of here to pay for everything. It feels messy, right?
I think a lot of the kind of emotional discretionary spending is very kind of, in a lot of ways, unconscious. Like, you don't know how to track it. You don't know if you're overspending or underspending, right? It's kind of all mixed into one big bucket. And that's where we see people get into trouble with, either overspending to the point where they're accruing debt, or overspending to the point where there's just nothing left over to actually save or invest or put money towards things that are important to them, be that short term or long term.
Yeah. As a former person that used this cash flow system, I can tell you what it resulted in for me was never knowing where I was at, never being able to measure, like, how am I doing so far this month? We're 20 days into the month. Am I on track? Have I spent too much, too little? No idea.
Yep,
There's no
for
clarity
sure.
on it.
Yep. All right, now we've shifted gears on the screen here to what a behavioral cash flow strategy looks like from a big picture. So to kind of break this out, essentially what we're trying to do, again, is split out your two primary sources of spending: committed spending and your spendable, which is your emotional discretionary spend. So instead of everything going into one account and spending from one account, what we like to see happen is your income, or incomes if you're with a partner, flow into what we refer to as your committed cash flow account. That's probably typically, like, if you're with a partner, your joint checking account. From that joint account, we want all of your committed expenses to be paid from that account, ideally. So we're talking about all your housing, all your transportation costs, and all your primary financial obligations. So that could be current savings and investments, debt payments, maybe memberships,
Insurance.
child care, you name it.
These are things that don't require any effort or energy. Like, they're things that you've already determined are essential, and we don't need to think about them on a monthly basis.
That's right. And then what we like to do from there, and we'll get into an actual case study here, is essentially give each partner a spendable amount that they would then use on a separate vehicle, be that a separate checking account that they're using, or in a lot of cases, it's a prepaid credit card. We'll get into a favorite tool that we like to use for that. Just think of it this way, is that it needs to be separated. So say that amount is $300 a week or $500 a week that you would have on a separate vehicle or separate card or account. And your job, rather than budgeting that $500 a week on to certain discretionary spends like groceries or eating out or coffees on the go or clothing, we want to develop a system to say, here's your $500 per week. If that's your spendable, for example, we want you to just go live. Can we bring enough awareness to your spending where we want you to spend your $500 however you want? This type of structure typically works the best with our behaviors and if you have the right tools in place, you can still monitor your spending a little bit. You can bring that awareness to it. So if you can stay within that kind of guardrail approach of your spendable, higher likelihood that you're going to be able to have the rest of your cash flow plan working for you, ideally automated and allowing you to reach your goals. All right. So moving on to our case study.
All right. I'll start giving them some background here, Scott.
Okay. Fire away.
We've got a couple. Scott loads it up here. We've got a couple. We've got Luke and Leah. Luke is a data analyst earning about $85,000 a year salary, and Leah is a chiropractor that's pulling $120,000 of income from her practice.
Yep.
So their combined net income on a monthly basis for their household is $12,700.
Yep. And they just bought a house.
Yeah, they just bought a house, planning to start a family. So their expenses have recently changed. There's a bit of anxiety about where all the money's going.
So let's break this down. We got Luke and Leah. They got $12,700 and change of net income coming in each month. On the debt side, Leah still has a couple of student loans outstanding. She's got a provincial student loan at $14,000. She's got a payment on that of $360. She's got a federal student loan, $26,000 left on that with a payment of $800 a month. And they have a vehicle loan as well. On the mortgage side, like Chris said, they just bought a house. House purchase was for $600,000. They put 10% down, so their mortgage is $540,000. Interest rate of 4.1. Big thing that factors into cash flow, though, is their monthly payment at just over $2,600. You want to go through expenses?
Yeah, this is where it all comes together here. And so you'll see at the top of each of these categories, we start with housing expenses, then transportation, then financial. So these are the three main committed cash flow categories. So we just want to consider what your typical spend is. And some of these might require averages, right? Like hydro or heat bills, those things can change month to month. We just
Mhm.
want to have an educated guess. It doesn't have to be the exact number because we're not trying to budget exact numbers here.
Yep.
We're trying to plan cash flow based on normal occurrences.
Yep. So if you're listening along right now from a housing standpoint for their mortgage, maintenance, their utilities, their phone, cable bill, cell phone, home insurance, we're at about 4,000 and change per month for their housing expenses.
So then we're moving down to transportation. So we've got some annual vehicle maintenance. We've got their payment for their vehicle, and then they have a lease for their other vehicle. We've got some gas and we've got some insurance. Again, all of these ideally are automated, happening automatically every month. We're now at
Mhm.
about 1900 for transportation.
Yep. And then moving on to financial obligations. Again, these are committed in nature. For Luke and Leah, they don't have a huge amount of financial obligations. They got a fitness membership. They go to F45, so that's costing them about $380 a month. They are currently doing a small kind of amount each month into RSP and TFSA, 200 each into RSP and 100 each into their TFSA. And in addition to that would be their 2 debt payments that Leah's making to her student loans, her provincial and federal.
So
All
total
right.
there for financial, we're at $2,140. So these are there's 3 main categories. And if you look at the very top of the screen share, you'll see this monthly committed cash flow number of $8,111.
Mhm.
So this is just their committed cash flow. We haven't talked about any of the emotional spend, right?
Or their goals or anything like that, right? This is just what
Right.
they need to kind of get through each month. All the non-sexy fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
All right, but this is where it gets exciting. This is where exciting for financial planners. I'll put a caveat on this, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So walk us through this, Chris.
Yeah. So if you're not watching this, I guess on this tab here, Scott's sharing essentially their spendable amount and then some optional adjustments that we could add for say specific goals. Okay. So maybe they have a goal to pay down their mortgage more aggressively. Maybe it's to pay down their debt more aggressively. We don't know yet. But overall, we're just looking at the big picture right now. And what that tells us is their total income is $12,742 per month. Their committed expenses are $8,111. And so they have a bunch left over. And we're going to
Yeah,
differentiate that between some specific goals and then their emotional spending.
for sure.
So at the top here, we have the spendable range where we can kind of adjust. And this is where we would be looking at your past history. So Luke and Leah would have shared some, statements with us from their our credit cards or in bank cards that they use for their emotional spending, and we would have
Mhm.
done our best to get an estimated amount that they typically need to or have been spending
Mhm.
for these emotionally related things like groceries, shopping, eating out, hobbies, entertainment, all those types of things. Okay?
When it comes to determining what a spendable amount should be for a household, sometimes it's important to use rules of thumb. I think it's fair to say if you're spending 40% of your net income on discretionary, kind of all the fun, emotional stuff, it's likely putting you in a situation where you won't have anything left over to probably save towards short term goals. You might not have the extra cash to save and invest. You might not have the extra cash to have the right insurance in place. Right? A good rule of thumb, I think, in a lot of cases is to say what we typically find works best for most is that you probably could safely spend somewhere between 20% on the low end, maybe 30% on the high end, and still leave some wiggle room to put towards goals, both short and long term. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all dependent on you on your personal situation and your income level and your goals and values and your habits.
Yep. For
But
sure.
before we even get to that point, it's like we'll know pretty soon if you've overspent on your housing or transportation financial commitments
Yeah.
because there won't be much left here on the spendable side to allocate, right?
hmm hmm
So if 40 or 50 or 60% of your income is going towards housing, well, there's probably something that needs to change, right?
Yep. Absolutely. For sure.
So let's assume the spendable is at $3,000 per month or $700 per week. What this means is Luke and Leah are free to go and spend $700 per week on in a separate location where they can clearly track that.
hmm
And if they can stay within that guardrail of 3,000 per month or 700 per week, they should have just under $1,600 left over. And this is where we get to be intentional with allocating towards what's important to Luke and Leah.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I mentioned, like, maybe it's paying down debt more aggressively, maybe it's investing, maybe it's, saving for like their travel fund. Maybe they want to do a reno on their house. Maybe it's developing a mat leave fund so that when they have their first child, Leah can take a bit more time off and
Mm-hmm.
not feel that pressure.
So let's say that they have that $700 a week in spendable, $3,000 a month. That leaves them with $1,600. They're doing a little bit of saving and investing right now, $600 a month between the two of them. But this is not going to be perfect. We're just kind of working this on the fly here. But things that I noticed when we went through their cash flow plan originally was they're not putting any money away currently into an emergency fund. Currently, Luke and Leah have no insurance in place whatsoever. And they've indicated that they want to continue traveling, and they also want to be in a position where they're prepared to have a little bit of an extra like slush fund, maternity fund for if and when they have their first child. So how will we map this out?
Yeah, let's start with their priorities, right? So
Yeah.
what we need to take care of first is the immediate needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that emergency fund is probably the first place to start. We
Yep.
ideally would like to have everybody with some kind of emergency fund in place, and that could be as high as like 3 months worth of income.
Yep.
For
Won't
some.
happen overnight. Yeah.
Nope.
Won't happen
But
overnight.
let's put a few $100s there. Okay.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, if somebody passes away or becomes disabled, is unable to earn an income, like these are the types of risks that insurance can cover. We should
Mm-hmm.
probably look at addressing those. So let's plug some amounts in for disability, especially for Leah.
Yep.
Luke probably has a group plan, so he probably doesn't have the same insurance need, especially on the disability front. But
Mm-hmm.
they probably need some disability, life, maybe some critical illness insurance as well.
Yeah. So these aren't perfect, but we got $300 a month to emergency savings, $250 a month for a disability contract for Leah. I got $60 to give them a little bit of critical illness insurance each, and $80 for some life insurance. These are just ballpark numbers, but good placeholders. And that leaves us with $900 left that we could allocate towards some short-term goals and maybe consider beefing up some of their long-term investments.
Yeah. Well, let's go to those short-term goals, and let's say the travel, and the other one was the mat leave, right? Yeah. So what if we did 400 each?
Great.
Cool.
Again, this is unique to every household. And the beautiful thing is that this is the exact process that we take our clients through, where we show them the money that's left over after we say, all right, can you commit to $700 a week? You can? Perfect. It leaves you with this amount left over. How do you want to allocate it? What's important to you? Like, this is just to give you an idea of how we go through this process. But, all right. So that left them, if we do $400 to each travel and maternity leave, it leaves us with only $100 left. So I would actually backtrack. So this is the beautiful part of this process. I'd actually probably bring that down to maybe $250 to each to leave a little bit more wiggle room. That brings us back to $400. Maybe we could let's just say we could increase their investments by a little bit, right? Let's go to $600 for their RSP. What I like to do is leave a little bit of buffer. So in this case, we have $200 left over in buffer. It's nice to have that for those kind of committed expenses that we just haven't accounted for in their cash flow plan. Right?
Yeah, especially for someone that doesn't have any awareness of where their money is going. If you're coming in and you're like, I really have no clue where my money's going, we need a lot of buffer. We might need $400 a month of buffer to start with. And as you refine your process and bring more awareness to your spending, we can decrease that number. And then that means you can put more towards your goals.
Yep. And the last thing I'll say here in terms of when we build this out, we could be going through this process of plugging numbers into new priorities that we want to allocate cash flow towards. And we might go through this process and say, you know what? In second thought, can we actually bump that spendable amount down to $650 a week? Because you know what, that would give us a little bit more breathing room. Now our buffer is back up to $400 per month. Now we can maybe allocate a little bit more to those savings goals, right? If that's important to you, if you didn't indicated that's important to you, then now we can bump that back up. And, now we're at $350 per month for our mat leave and our travel fund, with a buffer there still as well, right? So you can see how this is kind of a process that takes some give and take, but ideally you're set up with a system to say, you know what, if I stick to my spendable amount, each month, each week, my goals are going to be hit. I'm going to be making progress. Sure. For sure.
All right. So let's get practical. Let's maybe stop the screen share and let's get into like, how do we set this up? So now
Yep.
we've gone through this and we know we now have an emotional spending or a spendable number, a weekly or monthly amount that we have this kind of guardrail around.
Yep.
And you've said previously, Scott, that this needs to happen in a different location or with a different spending vehicle. Tell us a bit more about that. How could that work?
I think the place that I'll start and the vehicle that we probably recommended most to clients, and I use myself personally, is what's referred to as a KOHO MasterCard. KOHO is KOHO. They're a prepaid MasterCard. You can use it just like any other credit card. And in some cases, you can use KOHO to like still get some cash back rewards and other features as well. So it works just like a credit card, but with the big caveat of there's no risk of overspending. If your spendable is $700, you try to make a purchase that goes above and beyond that, it's a no-go.
Yeah, it's a credit card to the extent that you load it.
Correct.
So like if you get your KOHO in the mail, it has $0 on it. You can't use it yet.
Yeah,
you cannot go
doesn't come with a limit
into debt on it.
That's right.
So you preload it, right? And that's a big change for a lot of people. This preloading of a card and then spending down on that. That's the concept, right?
Yep, for sure. I've been doing cash flow plans for clients since about 2017, and I've been a personal user, my wife and I as well, on KOHO since 2017 as well. And now we think of KOHOs as like, it's almost like a slang word. Like, have you sent my KOHOs yet? Oh, I'll send your KOHOs for sure for the week, no problem. Right?
Yeah.
And it brings that new level of awareness where neither of us feel restricted with our spending. We're just given our amount. We have a guardrail. Go spend however you want. And we know in the background in our committed account that we have everything prioritized in terms of what we want to accomplish and where our cash flow is truly going.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Totally. And I just want to take it back to like the traditional budget for a second. Like in the traditional budget, it matters if you spend more on groceries or more on gas or more on shopping. In this behavioral cash flow system, it doesn't matter what you spend on what category. All that matters is that you stay within that spendable amount. It does take some planning and structure and really just being intentional, like planning ahead to do this. But it's all building good, strong habits and awareness, and all of this. The whole reason we're doing any of this is to translate it back to you achieving your goals. Absolutely. And we know that if you stay within this amount, you can set aside X amount for investing for retirement, X amount for paying down debt, going on that trip, whatever it is.
All right, Chris. So it's been a great conversation on personal cash flow. What would you say the big takeaways are?
Yeah, I think if you're going to take any action on this on your own, the first step is to start building awareness, to understand what is coming in and out of your bank accounts on a monthly basis. That is so hugely beneficial and underrated. That's the first step. If you are in a position where you just don't know what's going on and you're like, where does it all go? Start to build that awareness, drill in, investigate, start to, just observe and do it without blame, shame, or guilt.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
What's that hat? What's our hat? Is that
no shame, no blame?
No shame, no blame.
No shame, no blame hat on.
Yeah, put that hat on.
If you're doing it with a partner, in particular. Yeah.
Even if you're doing it yourself, though, honestly, like
no shame, no blame for yourself.
What's done is done. We just need to understand what's done. We can't change or control that. There's no point in getting worked up about what's done. What we can control is what we do going forward, and we can use the history of what's happened to inform our decision making going forward.
Yep,
so
for sure.
That is your first step, and I would say like that's probably the key takeaway if that's where you're coming to it from. If you already have some awareness of your spending, maybe you can start to kind of create your committed expenses and automate those and start to think about a spendable and how that could work with a KOHO account or a different account like that, and start testing it out.
Yep, for sure. Cool. Anything else? Good to wrap?
Well, let's wrap it there. Feel free to leave us a review if you're enjoying this. Share it with somebody that you think would benefit. Thank you guys for listening and talking about the fun topic of cash flow planning.
All opinions expressed on the Chiro Money Show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be considered financial, legal, accounting, or tax advice. Always consult your own team of licensed professionals before making decisions about your finances.